Welcome back, guys. We are back with the second in the series of reviewing the NewZ released sets. Today we're taking a look at NewZ Set 2 Desperation. The first set that we made was just kind of to like introduce the idea of there sort of being a fan set, and so there were some new masteries that sort of intentionally mixed up the way the game kind of felt, but there wasn't like a theme or kind of overall goal to the set. As the sets go on, they definitely get like much more dedicated in what they're like wanting to do. This was the first set where we had kind of a goal or like a vision with it specifically. And so the gimmick of this set, Desperation, is that it's based on the Dragon Ball Super Broly movie. The idea was that there's already a Broly subset 1 and 2, so this was in like working practice Broly subset 3. And we were like, what if we just made more like Broly subset promos? And at the same time, it felt like a great opportunity to generate some support for Fusion MPs and stuff like that too, since Gogeta is a huge part of this movie, and maybe introduce Gogeta. So there's another 25 cards in this set, actually 26 if we count the preview card that's released at the end. So let's just kind of get right into talking about them. This first one we've got is Black Right Wind Up. It's a physical combat card. It has to be the first attack you perform in combat. Specifically, it doesn't have to be the first card that you play, but it has to be the first attack you perform. Physical attack to +6 power stages of damage. If stopped, your black style attacks deal +2 life cards of damage for the remainder of combat. It just +6 is a big attack right off rip. You do have to throw it first, which means it's a little bit telegraphed. If you're going to try playing this in a black deck, you can kind of assume that one of these might be coming. But if they stop it, they're stopping a big attack, so they're kind of inclined to do so. But it means that they're going to take a bunch of life cards through the rest of combat, which you like to. If they don't stop this, they're going to take a big ol' attack on this one. If you're playing it in Black Drunk Saga, that's +8/+2. I mean, there's just a ton of ways that the damage kind of piles up, and giving Black a big, beefy punch felt good as kind of an opener to the set.
Yeah, one notice I've had with this card is in Black World Games. I think the NZ has helped Black World Games Mastery become a little bit stronger and a little bit more playable. And Black World Games cares about performing black physical attacks, and so this has been a great card in that set as a powerful way to lead off. And that deck doesn't care as much about hand destruction and stuff like that, so you can just pile on some damage. And this card is very good at piling on damage.
Yeah. Up next.
So up next is the first of the if used by a fusion personality cards. This is the black one. It's Black Gogeta's Energy Dodge. So stops an energy attack, shuffle up to two black style cards in your discard pile into your deck. If used by a fused personality, discard a card from your opponent's hand and remove the top five cards of their discard pile from the game. So these if used by fused personality cards are all going to be pretty straightforward in that if you're playing a deck that likes to fuse, you should always play the card. The cards are very very strong. So the real question is going to be, okay, if I can't fuse, how good is this card? So stops an energy attack, shuffle up to two black style cards in your discard pile back into your deck. This is not a super strong card. Now, if there's even a little bit of a chance you can fuse, it's a pretty reasonable block. Black does not have a lot of great energy blocks. It has like one standard energy block. And the more the meta shifts to energy decks, you could see finding space for this in there. Shuffling the black style cards back in, I mean, black has a lot of really powerful cards. So, if you have some specific ones you're looking for, or even things just like black swivel attack that you can't target with your buffer block and things like that, this card could be pretty helpful in decks like that.
Yeah, I agree. And then the discard a card from your opponent's hand, also great if you're fused. Remove the top 5 cards of the discard pile from the game is uh, another good thing too. That with transform, like we talked about in the last set, uh, discard hate is at a premium right now. So being able to take some cards out of the discard pile doesn't hurt. There's also a mastery that was created in one of the later NZ sets called Black Calamity Mastery. And anytime you would remove cards from your opponent's discard pile, you can instead discard the top 3 cards of their deck. So you could choose to have them discard a card from their hand and remove, or and mill 3, or discard the top 3. You can kind of lean into that if that's the direction you were going. So there's a little bit of flexibility in this, but like Nick said, if you're just playing it as an energy block, there are probably better energy blocks to play. But if you have potential to fuse, it's a pretty good choice. Then we have blue Gogeta's Energy Array. Energy attack, doing 5 life cards of damage. Lower your opponent's anger 2. If used by a fused personality, this attack stays on the table to be used an additional time this combat and gains, if successful, you may discard a non-combat card in play. This is another one of those examples where if you're just looking at this card, if you ignore all the stuff about being fused, energy attack doing 5 life, lower your anger 2 is like some Cell Saga ass card. But it's fine damage wise, and lower opponent's anger 2 is sort of functional right now with the inclusion of blue enlightened mastery, which lets your effects that lower your opponent's anger, you can instead have them raise your anger 1 instead. So you could kind of have this be an energy for 5 that raises your anger 1 if you wanted it to. So there's a little bit of flexibility in that. But if you're fused and you get to use it twice, double use energy attacks is kind of a thing blue, is known for with its blue double blast and stuff. So having another one of those is cool, and then being able to discard a non-combat card for a while was pretty important for blue to have access to. It's gotten a little better at dealing with that kind of stuff as of late, but at the time, a couple years ago when this was made, that was pretty necessary. If you were able to get fused, this was very helpful.
Yeah, I mean, still any kind of non-combat hate is obviously very powerful. This is another one of those cards. If you confuse it all, it's a pretty reasonable card on its low end, so you should just stick it in your deck and go to town with it. Otherwise, it's a fairly weak energy attack overall. But blue is a color that does not have the most energy attacks that are very useful, so you could find reasons to play this card. So the next card up is Blue Energy Slide. This is an energy combat, endurance 3, stops an energy attack. Raise your anger 1 level, lower your opponent's anger 1 level. If your opponent has not yet dealt you damage this combat, then for the remainder of attacks, your attacks cost 1 less and deal +1 life card. So this is one of the better blue energy blocks in the game, maybe the best blue energy block in the game. Raise your anger 1, lower your opponent's anger 1. So you're already getting an anger for yourself, and related to like blue enlightened, you can make this a 2 anger card, or sometimes just lowering your opponent's anger 1 is just fine. It's exactly what you want to do. The effect about your opponent not dealing you damage, anytime you can make your attacks cost less and deal more, those are both big positives. And endurance 3 is a lot. So this is a card I play in basically every blue deck. It is one of the better blue energy blocks in the game, and anytime you're in blue, you should definitely be considering playing this card.
Yeah, Nick kind of nailed it right on the head. I run 2 of this most of the time. Not quite a full 3 myself, just because like having a ton of energy blocks sometimes isn't necessary. But I run 2 of this in like every blue deck I play. So I agree. If you're playing blue, I would play this card. I think it's great. Namekian Piccolo's fusion training. For its non-combat here, it searches your life deck for an ally and a card with fuse or fused in the text box and place each of them into either your hand or into play. For the remainder of combat, your fused allies can take control of combat regardless of your MP's stages above 0. So this card it should be kind of obvious, but its intent is to kind of replicate Piccolo kind of teaching the various characters throughout the series how to fuse. In the movie, he helps Goku and Vegeta sort of perfect their fusion dance to become Gogeta, but he also in the show teaches Goten and Trunks how to kind of nail the Gotenks fusion. He practices with them for a while, shows them how to do it with Goku. So say you're playing this in a Namekian deck with Piccolo, you could have 4 of it if you were feeling truly rambunctious, I guess, but be able to bring out a Goten and a Trunks, or a Goten or a Trunks, and get started that way. You can grab the fusion dance. You can grab a Vegeta if you have a Goku in play or something already, and work on playing the Katara earrings, things like that. There's also the Gogeta and the Vegeta and Goku, which we'll get to in this set too. There's 2 of them that both talk about fusing. So it will sort of let you get one ally and then the ally that talks about fusing. So you can kind of set up the full fusion that way too. There's just a lot of kind of versatility of what you can grab with this card.
So one thing that Derek did fail to mention is in the later sets there's a new level 5 for Piccolo printed. It's also a level 5 for Kami, and it's called Piccolo Fused. and it is reached by fusing a Namekian ally and the card Forbidden Fusion. So this card can actually go get both of those cards. So you can go put the ally into play and get you the Forbidden Fusion you need to go to your Piccolo level 5. It's a very interesting card, a very strong card. We'll get to it in a later set. So this actually came out before that, and it actually saw more value being created later on when Piccolo Fused became a card.
Good catch.
Namekian Piccolo's Telepathy. So this is actually my favorite card in the set by a good margin. I've been playing this card a ton. So it's a combat card. Search your life deck for a level 1 ally and place it into play at 5 above 0. If you have no allies in play when you use this, you can search for an additional level 1 ally and place it into play at 5 stages above 0. Then if you declare to Tokawaza, you can end combat. So the reason I think this card is wildly underplayed is Namekian Cell. This card is absolutely bonkers in Namekian Cell. Going to get your first ally, or going to get an ally, or sometimes two allies, and then the ability to end combat is super good in all energy decks, which most ally decks are. I think this card could also see a lot of play in Dende. Basically, anything that cares about having allies could get a lot of use out of this card. I do think that it kind of accidentally found its home in Namekian Cell, and the card has been incredibly impressive in every single use so far.
Yeah, I there's a video that exists on this channel where I went over what I think were the top 5 most underrated NZ cards, and this was in my top 5. I think that this card is awesome. Getting an ally or even two on one card is great. We play like Gathering of Heroes and things like that to go get one ally back. This one gets you maybe two. And like worst case scenario, it's a combat card that says end combat. Like even if you weren't playing allies, you might run this as just a styled thing to end combat. If you were a deck that wanted to like stay out of combat, you have it's styled, which works well for the Namekian stuff and does the end combat thing. So it's good for like ball deck, whatever you want to do. There's just a lot of versatility in this card. I think it's kind of criminally underplayed. Orange Right Fist Slam. Focused physical attack doing +3 power stages of damage. Empower 4. If you have performed 2 other orange style attacks this combat, search your life deck for up to 2 drills and set them aside. At the end of this turn, place the chosen drills into play. So, focus physical +3 is not huge damage, but it's decent. Empower 4 is a big empower, so you can get this doing some pretty decent damage that way. But if not, and you perform 2 other attacks, you can go get your drills, set them aside, bring them into play at the end of the turn. As you saw in the last set, there's that card, Orange Roundhouse, that lets you bring in cards that are waiting to come into play, which combos nicely with stuff like this. If you've played a searching technique and this card, and you've now got this like pile of drills waiting to come into play at the end of turn, that's pretty good. It's just kind of nice to be able to grab things that you need out of your deck and set them aside. You don't get the sort of value from them immediately, but they're sort of protected from being taken as life cards and damage, or being like scout maneuvered or something like that out of your deck in the meantime. So just setting them kind of out of play is a nice safe place to keep them too.
Yeah, and there's actually some drills that are more valuable if they come into play at the end of the turn. Think of like a Vegeta's Quickness drill. If I had the choice to put that into play at the end of the turn instead of immediately, I would always choose at the end of turn. So there is some value you can find from that, but just being a focus physical for +3 with Empower 4, that's on the floor of that card is very very high. That's a very strong physical attack.
Yeah, and it's orange physical, so it's pretty likely you'll have like a joint restraint or something. So it's a physical for +7. It just kind of adds up.
Okay, so this is Orange Gogeta's counterattack. So stops a physical, gain 3 stages. If used by a fused personality, you may discard any number of non-combats you control. For each non-combat you discarded this way, your orange style attacks deal +1 stage of damage for the rest of combat. So obviously you can see what the theme of this is going for. It's kind of the Orange Vegeta Assault type effects. where you set up your non-combats, and then you have your one turn where you discard your non-combats and make your attacks do a whole bunch of damage, and kind of churn it out. Most fused personalities are in really high power stages, and even Gogeta, who we'll see later, performs multiple attacks, so you can really shell out a lot of damage, and this card could easily be kind of a finisher for a lot of fusion decks. If you're not a fused personality, stop a physical gain 3 stages is probably not good enough to play in most decks. I would note that you gain 3 stages is not your main personality, so you could put it on an ally if you wanted to do an ally kind of thing, which a lot of fusion decks, have a lot of ally synergies going on, so there's some value there. But overall, this is kind of one of the weaker of the if used by fused personality cards on its floor, but also one of the stronger if you're actually fused.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that the way you did at the end there. That's exactly what I was going to say. It's this card is like real not even underplayed. It's very unplayed. There's just not a lot of people who kind of take this gamble. A physical gain 3 stages is like Nick said, not a good enough card to run in most decks. But if you're a deck that is like pretty consistent at getting fusion off, which there are some getting much better at doing, um, being able to kind of set up a big ol' like smackdown kill turn uh, is always been effective with Orange Review's Assault, with Carpet Attack, things like that. That kind of style of play has always seen use. So if you can pull that off with a fused personality, that's cool. You might be getting like too cute trying to do both of those things in one deck, but if you can pull it off, it's a ton of damage you can shell out. Then we get Red Gogeta's Roundhouse. This card rules. Physical attack doing +4 power stages of damage. Raise your anger 1. If successful, raise your MP to its highest power stage. And if used by a fused personality, search your life deck for a red style attack that is not Red Axe Heel Kick or Red Gogeta's Roundhouse, and place it into your hand. Remove from the game after use. So, talking about floors like we've been talking about with all of these kind of fused cards, physical for +4 that gains you an anger and powers you up to full if successful is pretty decent. That's a pretty solid red physical attack. +4 is a decent damage modifier. Anger and a full power up is good. Then if you're fused, getting fifth, sixth, or fourth, fifth, and sixth copy of Red Axe Heel Kick is pretty great. I've seen a number of turns where these have chained into some pretty ludicrous things. So if you can line it up, this card puts in work. Even if you're not fused, it's just a decent attack.
Yeah, I mean, you can just immediately think about if you are fused, this can turn into Red Shattering Leap, or it can turn into Red Critical Blow. We saw in the last set, two very strong options. You can tell when a card has multiple card restrictions that it can't get, how easy it is to loop it into something powerful. As far as the floor, physical +4 raise your anger 1 if successful power up to full. Like you can just play that in most decks. Like this card is perfectly fine. I like to play this in my MPPV decks because the ability to power yourself up to full is just better than a lot of other if successfuls and secondary options that you have. So I think this is a card that is seeing a little bit of play. I think Mighty Mask has kind of given this card a resurgence, so we can use it with Gotinks a little bit. But I do really like this card, and I definitely think it's worth consideration in any red physical deck. So the next card is Red Energy Hold. It's an energy combat. Stops a physical, raise your anger 1. If you declare Tokuwaza, attach this card to your opponent's MP. While attached, your opponent's attacks do -X stages, where X is your anger. You can only have one copy attached at a time, and you discard this when your opponent's MP levels. So the first key part of this card is it's when your opponent's MP levels. There are a lot of decks that do not level. And so what that means is this card's not going anywhere, which is pretty good against most physical decks. If your opponent's on, a Namekian physical deck or Saiyan physical deck, most of those decks don't do a whole lot of leveling. So this card's just going to set in play, and your opponent's attacks are going to do -2 or -3 all the time. Um, I've always found this card to be a very powerful effect. If you are not all in anger, this is a card you should consider. If you are red energy, this is a card you would like. If you are in PPV, this is a card you'd like. Like there's really no red deck where I would not at least consider playing this card.
Yeah, this card is another one that was on my list of 5 most underrated cards. I think this card sees less play than it should. I think it's just a fantastic block. A physical block that gets you anger is fine. Like that's just a not attacker attacks phase action that gets you anger is always welcome, especially in red decks that want to level. And then getting to reduce your opponent's damage a ton is also great. There's plenty of decks that gain, like Nick said, like 3-4 anger and just can kind of ride that out for a while. Make your opponent's attacks just do next to nothing all game. Or if you're just leveling a bunch, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, you're getting kind of a varying level of protection from this, but always something. It's just kind of always good. And sometimes they just never level, so you have it forever. I think this card's awesome. Speaking of awesome cards, Saiyan Gogeta's Rapid Fire. Saiyan Heritage only. Focused energy attack. If successful, draw a card. If used by a fused personality, this attack deals an additional +4 life cards of damage, and your opponent's personalities in play lose X power stages to a minimum of 0, where X is the number of cards in your hand when you performed this attack for the first time. So there's already Saiyan Triple Blast, which is just energy attack draw a card, or I guess focused energy attack draw a card. This one, Saiyan Heritage only, which is very relevant for some of the other stuff that we've kind of already looked at. You can fetch this with some cards that care about that, like Goku Young again. Being able to draw a card on another attack in Saiyan where you already have a big hand is also good. And then if you're fused, getting this to do a bunch of extra damage, and your opponent's personalities just lose a bunch of stages based on the number of cards you have in your hand, which often is also a lot of cards because you're Saiyan. You can just put out like a big number swing with this card, let alone just getting to draw a card. So I think this card is great, even if you're not fused. Just to focus energy that, if successful, draws you a card, it's already enough for me to play in most of my Saiyan decks.
Yeah, so as Derek mentioned, Saiyan Triple Blast is a card that has seen sporadic play since its existence, and it is just focus energy for 3 if successful draw a card. So this card is just strictly better than that, and it has the buff for the fused personalities. I think you play this card in every Saiyan energy deck. There's kind of a lot of back and forth in the league about the power level of this card. I actually think the power level is very high. Focused energy attacks are hard to stop. If successful draw a card is always good. And if you can fuse, this will be the best card in your deck, or one of the very best cards in your deck. And if you can't fuse, I don't care. It's a focused energy draw card. It's going to be a good enough card to play. I have, Saiyan MBS decks where I like to throw energy attacks and level. I play this as a 3 of in all of them. I think this card is closer to a staple in a lot of Saiyan decks. And it's another card that from this set especially that's vastly underplayed.
Agreed.
All right. Saiyan Crossblock is a physical combat. It's got Endurance 1. It's also Saiyan Heritage only. Stop the physical, raise your anger 1. If you Tokawaza, you may remove 3 Saiyan style cards in your discard pile from the game to draw a card. So, Endurance 1 is always useful. You can't argue with any endurance. Any endurance is better than no endurance. But stops physical, raise your anger 1, draw a card. Obviously, that is awesome. The effect is very strong. Anytime you're drawing cards, it's very strong. It is very easy to put 3 Saiyan style cards in your discard pile. Basically, this means that other than the first combat of the game, you're always going to get to draw a card with this. Um, this is immediately the best Saiyan physical block in the game. Saiyan is a style that likes to play Omnis, and I it should branch out a little more because this is more powerful than almost all of the Omnis as well. This card is an auto include for me as a 3 of in every single Saiyan deck, and I would suggest that it is for you as well.
Yep. 3 of every Saiyan deck I play. I play a good chunk of Saiyan too, and I always play this card. I think, again, like I mentioned with the last card, a physical attack that gives you, or a physical block that gives you anger. Off attack or attack phase anger is always good. And then you almost always draw a card. I mean, you can't argue with a block that draws a card. And then Saiyan Heritage only means that you have a fetchable block too if you're playing something like Goku Young again. So that's also pretty good. I think this card's awesome. Also kind of underplayed, but I think it should just be a 3 of. Birth of a Legacy is limit 1 per deck. Use only if you have Goku in play as an ally. remove your Goku ally and play from the game, then shuffle up to 9 cards in your discard pile back into your life deck. You cannot lose the game due to survival victory until the end of your next turn. Check for victory conditions at that time. At the beginning of your next turn, place your removed Goku ally into play at 5 power stages above 0. Remove from the game after use. So there's a lot going on here. You've got to have a Goku ally in play and have this 1 per deck card, which already kind of makes it pretty narrow. There's a lot of times where this just like isn't good because it just doesn't do anything. But getting to just put 9 cards back into your deck, if you can pull this kind of thing off, is awesome. There's, that we play like the Boo level 4 or whatever that puts 8 cards back. Getting to do 9 is great. Not being able to lose by survival victory is a pretty big deal too. It's not obviously quite as wide or easy to do as like Where There's Life, There's Hope, but being able to just turn off a win condition for a turn, giving yourself 1 extra turn to try to get through what you're working on is pretty good. Getting your Goku ally back after you do all that is also cool, so you don't lose the ally by playing this card. You just lose it temporarily. I think this is a cool card. It's just really narrow and kind of... and sometimes I don't think the juice is like worth the squeeze on this card, but it was one of those that kind of really captures like a moment in the show. Send Goku off, survive. Goku like continues, is a sort of a gimmick to a moment in the movie. But as a card, it's tough to find a spot for. But I think when you pull it off, it's cool.
As a target for kind of where to play this card, I kind of think this card goes in Vegeta decks. I think that, if you want to look to Fuse and you want to look at, a Goku Humbled, which we'll see shortly, or, maybe going into Vegito either. I think this card is pretty reasonable include in that. It is narrow, obviously, but if you have multiple Goku allies in your deck, which is what you're going to want to have if you want to play this, and especially a Goku ally like the one we're going to see later on that continuously comes back, I think that this is a pretty reasonable choice for that, and I think it could fit in specifically those decks. So although narrow, as Derek stated, the effect is strong. So if you get this off one time, you feel great about it. The next card is Broly's Glacier Smash. Is a physical combat, physical attack doing 3 life cards of damage. If successful, your opponent's MP loses 2 power stages. If used by Broly and your anger level is 2 or more, this card stays on the table to be used 2 more times this combat. So a lot of the theme of this set is about the Broly movie, as said previously. This is a Broly named card, so Broly can play 4 of it. Physical attack doing 3 life cards is kind of mid for an ability. The if successful, your opponent loses 2 stages. That does not say to a minimum of 0. So those are always pretty interesting when you can kind of get some free life cards out of them from them losing stages. If used by Broly and your anger's 2 or more, you get to use it 2 more times. Obviously, that's where the money for this card is, right? So the Dragon Ball Super Broly cares a lot about performing multiple successful attacks and keeping the pressure on. That's what the MP is all about, and this card is very good at keeping the pressure on. So this is not a Broly only card. I don't think you would play it in most decks that aren't Broly, but Broly's really good at getting his anger up, and it's really easy to turn this card on. And when you turn this card on, 9 cards and 6 stages is a lot of damage for 1 card.
Yeah, I was going to say that specifically. 9 cards, 6 stages is huge. Takes a couple actions to get it done, but that's a lot of value. Like Nick said, I don't know if you would play this in something that's not Broly. I guess maybe if you're like a really aggressive freestyle deck that didn't have like another named gimmick you were doing, like if you weren't Trunks or Tien or Krillin or something. If you were just like looking for freestyle attacks, you might play this one because 3 life cards is 3 life cards or whatever. But I think it's really, it's not Broly only, but it's pretty Broly. But an attack you can use 3 times for 9 and 6 is pretty good. Then we have Broly Unleashed. It's an energy attack doing 8 life cards of damage, costs 3 power stages to perform. Damage from this attack cannot be prevented. If successful and you have 3 or more anger, you may advance a personality level. If you do, set your anger to 0. you cannot win by most powerful personality victory. So, um, off rip, energy for 8, cost 3, is a big ol' energy attack, and damage can't be prevented is very exciting on a big damage attack. No endurance, no prevention drills, no prevention from MPs or anything like that. You're just going to get 8 life cards with this if it's not stopped. That's not nothing by itself. But then if you have 3 or more anger, especially in Broly, that's easy to do. But in various like anger gaining decks, getting to 3 is easy enough. This sort of roughly gives you 2 anger, and then gives you you have to give up MPPV. But this does some certain stuff nice where you you don't actually gain anger from this card, so you can't like if you do really like desperately want to level, Winter Countryside isn't going to affect this card. Um, uh, it's just sort of nice to have a way to like level yourself without leveling your opponent through something, a card that would do like both players or something that isn't anger. And it does set your anger back to 0, so it kind of gives you the same value as leveling through anger would, but it just specifically isn't anger, so it's just one kind of avenue to get around those kind of effects.
Yeah, and the energy for 8 cards is a big old attack, like Derek said. So costing 3 stages is also interesting because 3 can be a lot, but being able to advance the personality level if it's successful means you can kind of throw this. If you're setting at 3 or 4 anger and you need to, you need some stages back, you can kind of throw this as a way to gain some stages too. Um,
Mm.
you know, there's not a ton of energy stops always floating around, and sometimes you're just going to get through. Any energy deck that likes to level, this card seems makes perfect sense for. And a lot of energy decks do like to level. They like to, gain the stages from resetting. I think this card is another card that we're talking about that's kind of underplayed. There's a lot of spots for it where it seems really good. So uh, definitely, if you're a leveling, especially leveling energy deck, this is something you should really consider. The next card is Frieza's Deception. So this is a combat card. It is unaffected by constant combat powers. Discard the top 3 cards of your life deck. Advance your opponent's main personality 1 level. And this card counts as 1 copy of Frieza's Irritation Growls while in your discard pile. So the key thing here is that this is the best freestyle card in NZ, and not enough people are playing it. Yes, this is probably a Sensei deck card. It's probably going to start most games in your Sensei deck, but as far as actual power level in a standard format, this is the highest power level card in NC. And it's kind of not obvious looking at it. So the card is unaffected by constant combat powers. That's obviously referring to Vegeta Settle Down, who doesn't allow combat cards. So this card does answer Settle Down. Um, this card, what this card is really good at is disrupting any kind of control strategy. Any strategy that is built around I'm gonna set on level 1 and not do anything, those decks are always Winter Countryside decks. So they're gonna prevent you from aura clashing them and are you tough enoughing them and things like that. So this is your answer to them because if they don't have a sphere of negation, they are just going to level 2. They're going to lose their drills. They're going to lose their MP's level 1 power that they care so much about. If you're not playing this card, especially in standard, in your Sensei deck, you are doing something wrong. Period. End of conversation. The last line about the card counts as 1 copy of Frieza's Irritation Grows. I think that this is, although a cute text and it's kind of in line with what the Frieza thing does, I think that's kind of it's not something that I would really play. I think the Frieza's Irritation Grows deck is still just an underwhelming way to play Frieza. Frieza's so interesting and so unique and so strong, and I just wouldn't want you to get confused as to that being why the card is good. The card is absolutely great because it advances your opponent's level. Again, I think that this should be in every single Sensei deck in Standard because I think that's how powerful the card is.
Yeah, perfect. I think there just isn't like conversation to be had about this card. Like you should just be using it. We try pretty hard to not make like perfectly obvious staple cards in NZ. We want them to be in like niche spots and stuff. But this one I really think is just like you just play it in every Sensei deck. As anyone who's played like the competitive nature of Score knows that like orange drill decks have always been arguably the best deck in the game, and being able to just tell those decks to get bent for a turn and disrupt like an entire game's worth of strategy is really, really strong. The freezes irritation grows text is pretty throwaway. If you're playing that deck, like it's cool that it works with it, but you don't even care that those like 15 words are on the card. It's just advance your opponent's personality level, mess up their entire game plan. Desperate Wish Drill is once per combat. If any of your allies would leave play, you may remove a Dragon Ball you control from the game instead. If you do, prevent all damage from the next attack your opponent performs. At the end of each turn, if you have 2 or more Dragon Balls and you are removed from game pile, place the bottom 2 cards of your discard pile at the top or bottom of your life deck. So, ally protection in the form of like sacrificing a Dragon Ball is a little bit peculiar as far as like what other effects would do. It's harder to find like kind of a home for this. But Dragon Balls that have kind of a like when they're played effect, Earth Balls, stuff like that, that you can play and then have leave play so that they can't get stolen and used against you. Uh, there's nothing, wrong with kind of using this as a way to make it so your opponent can't use a really strong effect you got to use while also still getting to protect your allies. And then if you've done this a couple of times, if you've like gotten to have this drill stick around, which is pretty possible because it's not like an immediately impactful drill in most settings. So it's not like the highest priority one. But if you can get 2 balls removed from the game, uh, then each turn you just get to rejuvenate 2 cards. Um, that's not nothing. It is, a slow trickle of kind of recurring some cards back into your life deck. Um, this is a weird card, but there are some like stretch cases where you might build something that wants to take advantage of this, wants to draw some cards or gain some anger, power up to full, and then have a ball leaf play to not get used against you.
Yeah, one thing to notice about this drill is the last line of the wording is place the bottom 2 cards of your discard pile at the top or bottom of your life deck. We saw Namekian Tactical Mastery in the last set. I think that this card could see play in a deck that kind of revolves around, Namekian's constant, shuffling of their discard pile and life deck and various things like that. Being able to put the cards in either spot is very strong. And also, notice that the card does not say any your opponent would make your allies leave play. It just says once they would leave play. So even if you're just trying to turn this on, you could shield destruction your own ally, which is a card that is sometimes just dead when you draw it. So there are ways around this to kind of turn this on, turn this effect on. Also, if it got to that point, you could Kami Fades or Guru Fades yourself to turn this drill on and have it every single combat, which could be kind of useful. Maybe in a style like freestyle where your drills aren't going anywhere. Just being able to manipulate the top and bottom of your life deck every turn. It could be a super strong effect in a deck like that.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked at the end of the 2024 season about the strength of various cards and kind of adjusting power levels and things to balance the meta out. And one of the cards that kind of kept coming up was Earth Dragon Ball 7, putting cards back on top of the deck.
Mm-hmm.
That card ends combat or whatever, so that's obviously better. But being able to stack cards on top of your deck just opens up such a turn swing. So getting to do that kind of repetitively um, is definitely not nothing.
So this is Jean A, Saiyan's wife. She's a level 1 ally. She's in B the whole way. Uh, Her power is use when one of your card effects requires you to discard a card from your hand. You can discard the top card of your life deck instead. If Bardock is your MP, Jean does not have to be in control of combat to use this power. So, obviously this is themed Bardock, a themed ally for Bardock. Jean is a rogue, just like Bardock is. So you can play him in, any style. Jean's power directly interacts with Bardock's power, which says if you have an ally in play, you can discard the top card of your deck to draw a card. Or you can discard a card from your hand to draw a card. So she makes it the top card of your deck instead, which is obviously much more powerful effect. She also pairs well with the Black Cell Saga Mastery, which is one of Bardock's, most used deck choices. And so there's various effects that she can be very strong for. I mean, if you're going to play Bardock, and I think that Bardock is a pretty reasonable choice because his powers are fairly good, she's a fairly useful MP. Also, if you're going to play a or ally, I'm sorry. And also, if you're going to play a mastery that cares about discarding your own cards from hand, Blue Cell Saga, Black Cell Saga, something like that, she can be a reasonable choice as an ally in any deck because, even if you only get that effect once or twice, I mean, that's a pretty good effect.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely harder to turn her on in other decks, but there's times where that will just work. Um, we talked in the last video in the set one review about Black Realization and about how that card's kind of narrow, but being able to end some floating effects, especially now with the introduction of Hercule's Megaton Punch introduced in NZ7, being able to end effects that affect you negatively. That card has an effect where you have to discard one of your cards to discard one of your opponent's cards. That just makes this a little bit better. You sort of mill one instead of discarding one. Uh, Kind of re-shifts the power balance of that card a little bit. So I don't know that you'd use it a ton, but it like that. This deck is now one of those, like, one of the better homes for that card. Then we get into the DBS Broly stack. Around the server and stuff. Everyone just sort of calls it NZ Broly because it's the Broly that came out in the NewZ sets. But there's 4 levels for him. We're going to kind of go over all of the levels real quick and then sort of talk about the stack in full from there. So first off, we have Broly Gentle Giant. Stops a physical attack or energy attack. Your next attack gains, if successful, raise your anger 2 levels. And 3.5 million in D. Just another personality. D is pretty big, pretty exciting.
The level 2 has a constant combat power. All attacks you perform deal plus X stages, where X is your current anger level. Whenever your opponent performs a successful attack, raise your anger 1. So important to note, he is an E at the bottom, all the way up to F at the top, which is extremely strong and very good at physical attacks.
And Furious Instinct with a constant combat power. Whenever your opponent is skipped or passes, raise your anger 1 level. All attacks you perform deal plus X power stages of damage, where X equals your current anger level plus 1. And now we're getting all the way up to F still. Uh, Still huge.
And his level 4 Broly Coming Undone has a constant power. Anytime a player performs a successful attack, raise your anger 1. Anytime you reach 5 anger, draw a card. He is in G at the bottom, and he does get into H a little bit, which is about as strong as you can possibly get.
What can you tell us about the stack, Nick?
So obviously Broly's stack cares about gaining anger. Worth noting that Broly cannot win by MPPV. Also worth noting that this is a unique personality to the Broly introduced in the score game, and so they cannot be mixed and matched. Broly is a rogue, so you can play him as a hero or a villain. He is just Dragon Ball Super Broly, so he is his own entity. Obviously, being in D at level 1 is fairly good. He levels quickly. He cares a lot about anger. You're going to want to play him in decks that gain a lot of anger. He's played with Goku Sensei quite a bit because all of his powers care about gaining anger and ways to gain anger, and your attacks do more if you gain anger. And he is very anger focused, as the theme would be with Broly being very anger focused. As you get up in levels, he kind of changes the way that you gain the anger, but the bonuses keep coming. And then, of course, when you get to the end, it's just all about how much anger can you churn out to draw as many cards as you can. Because even physical +3 when you're in H is a lot of damage.
Yeah, he gets up there real fast, and the damage just piles on really quick. Even just ignoring the, yeah, I mean, Nick just said it. The modifiers alone on cards, just looking at table with the brackets that he's in, he just has a huge capacity for dealing damage and taking less. He levels through very quickly and is good at getting to this one. The decks that are built around it can really kind of string a good level 4 turn along for a while. One thing that's cool to note that's worth it is that his level 1 is an Omni block. Blocks on a level 1 are always pretty good, especially an Omni block, and then getting some anger off of it is good too. This also makes this Broly excuse me. This also makes this Broly a good ally, which is something that is kind of unique to this Broly stack. The other Brolys are not good allies. But this one, having an Omni block, if you get to 0 or 1, is pretty great in every deck that can afford an ally. Having an extra block every turn is pretty good, and getting some anger if you want to be a deck that levels. Uh, can't turn that down. The stack is awesome. I don't know if Nick mentioned it specifically or not. I might have just missed it. But the the kind of rules between him being DBS Broly or not Broly or whatever, he can't mix with the other Broly levels, but he can play Broly only cards, so he can still play like Broly's Might and stuff like that. Just can't be mixed with other Broly levels.
Yeah, he still gets the benefit from saying Broly Smash and things like that
Yep.
as well. So and of course the cards that we've released, to go with him in this set, uh,
Yeah.
it's very much intended for him. He's an anger focused MP. They are anger focused cards, so yeah, very much play together.
Oh yeah. Then that takes us into the fusion based allies that we created. We have Goku Desperate Plea here. This card can only be played as an ally. Power: if you have Vegeta in play at the same personality level, you may fuse it with this card for a Gogeta Fusion Reborn from your Sensei deck. This is a solid power level for an ally. It means that you can, if you're playing Vegeta as your MP, or even if he's just one of your other allies, you can fuse if you can use an ally power without having to draw any extra cards like Fusion Dance or Patara Earrings. You just kind of have it as an effect. Getting to go into your Gogeta is super good. We'll get to that in just a second. Um, just a decent ally. If obviously, of course, if this is your strategy.
Yeah, and so with this, we'll go ahead and show the Vegeta version. It's basically the exact same card, Vegeta Humbled, except with if you have a Goku in play, you can fuse into Gogeta. The Goku one is the one I mentioned with the Birth of a Legacy earlier. That if you're playing a Vegeta deck, the allies. The way the rules work is they'll actually come back into play. They can come back into play later. They'll go into your deck. You can get them back out. So it gives you a lot of options to try to get that kind of stuff off. Also, just in these guys in a fusion deck, you can play Vegito in those decks as well, and just have both Gogeta and Vegito as options for your fusion possibilities. All
Yep.
fusion is pretty strong, and as we've shown you in this set, there's a lot of powerful effects you can get when you're fused. So these guys can lead you into Gogeta, who we're going to show next, and Derek can lead into that.
So Gogeta Fusion Reborn is the 50th card in the set and the final piece of the actual set 2. He cannot be removed from and is not considered to be in your Sensei deck for your opponent's card effects. So he's just protected from any of your opponent's like red aerial forces or stuff like that. And he has a constant combat power that your successful attacks gain. This card stays in play to be used an additional time this combat. One of the better cards in the game for anyone who's played the game a lot knows that Piccolo's multiform is fantastic, and just giving all your attacks stay on the table to be used one more time is very, very good. Having it attached to an MP as a card you don't have to draw is pretty great. Just a huge amount of power can come from this card. Now, there are a couple things to note with Gogeta. He is a fusion dance personality, but doesn't work the same way that Gotenks would. He's still on like a timer because this fusion, is temporary. But instead of doing the one card on your anger sword every turn or whatever, Gogeta just leaves play at the end of combat and it goes back into your Sensei deck. And then the allies that you used come back as well. So you get kind of the opportunity to continue to um, work on the Gogeta package. And you do lose them, temporarily. They kind of they get shuffled back, but you have you can you get the opportunity to do it again, as opposed to some of the other fusions that are sort of one and done. This one is a shorter time, but you can do it multiple times.
Yeah, so a big thing with this Gogeta is obviously he's an eye the whole way, which is the best you can possibly be. This Gogeta wants to come in play and just end the game. That is the goal. When you fuse into this Gogeta, you are trying to kill your opponent. Even if you only have two-ish, three-ish attacks in your hand, if your opponent doesn't have the correct blocks, you can get 6 attacks out of those 3 cards, and that's not counting getting all their secondaries if successful multiple times. Gogeta is a finisher, and Gogeta deck plays kind of like a combo deck where you You go to Gogeta, and then you just throw the kitchen sink at your opponent, and he is very good at it. I to B, which a lot of personalities are, is like +8 on the table. It's very easy for Gogeta to overwhelm an opponent.
Yeah, it adds up real fast. Gogeta is um, very, very strong. But like all of the fusions, it takes some work to get it done. So that's sort of like a natural balancing factor in him. It's easier to get him out than some other ones, but you still got to put in some effort to pull it off. You got to line up the timing on being able to use your ally effects, things like that. So there's some play against him, but if he hits the table, it is a scary time to face down.
Okay, and lastly, we have a preview for the next set. This is new Frieza level 1, Frieza the Evil Mastermind. He is in B all the way up. Power rating of 2. He has constant combat power. Once per combat, when your opponent makes a successful attack against you, you may discard a non-combat or ally in play. At the end of your turn, if there are no allies in play, you raise your main personality to its highest power stage. So I think this card is a little slept on overall. Frieza definitely does not have a strong level 1. So this is the level 1 I end up settling on most of the time with my Frieza decks. Uh, Most of the time your opponent's going to start the game with your invited or Victorial in play. And the first time they hit you with an attack, it might just do 4 or 5 stages, and you take your stages, and bam! Now I've gotten rid of your Victorial. Now I've gotten rid of your invited, and that's kind of the lowest end that this ever does. And a lot of the time, this is just, oh well, you played Fatherly Advice. Okay, well now you have to use Fatherly before you attack me, because otherwise I'm just going to take it, and I'm going to discard your Fatherly. And so Frieza's threat of activation is pretty significant. You're gonna end up taking the first attack a lot of the time, just because discarding the non-combat or ally is so useful.
Yeah, I included this card also on my top 5 underrated cards list. I think just a power that consistently has a detrimental effect like this, removing cards from your opponent every single time they do an attack. Well, I guess once per combat, but every combat that they hit you with something, you can clear something off the table. Some decks just never play any allies, so there's sometimes that it's just as a full power up to full. It is the end of your turn specifically, so it's not every combat for that part. But if it's your turn, you led with, you entered combat, you get a full power up. This is great because you can kind of lead into paying off all of your stages. Like if you're an energy deck, you can pay all those stages out to 0, and then go past combat, go into your opponent's turn with a fresh full power to full. You don't have to worry about that combat of being at 0 like a lot of other decks would have to deal with. I think this card is uh, way cooler than it gets the credit for. I think Frieza overall is a cooler MP than it gets than it than it than it sees representation for. I think Frieza's awesome, and this card especially I think is very cool. That's the last card to show off in NZ2. Thanks for sticking around through another one of these videos. Let us know what you think your favorite card in the set is, and we'll be back in very soon with the third of the set review videos. The next set that we're getting into is Transformation. I'm pretty excited to show you guys that one.
Yep. And just as a reminder, please play Frieza's Deception in your Sensei decks. Have a good day.
PSA: Do not stop playing Frieza's Deception.